I, 42F, have been married to my husband Tom, 45M, for 8 years now. We have a blended family that includes my 2 daughters from my previous marriage, Zoe, 22F, and Emma, 19F, and Tom's son Jake, 17M, from his previous relationship. Our family's story is complicated, and the recent events with Jake's dog have brought a lot of underlying issues to the surface. To give some context, my first marriage ended when Zoe was 14 and Emma was 11. Their father, Mark, had been having an affair with a co-worker for years, and when I finally discovered it, our marriage fell apart quickly. The girls took the divorce hard, especially Zoe, who had always been closer to her dad. She became withdrawn and rebellious, while Emma clung to me even more tightly than before. I met Tom about a year after my divorce was finalized. He was charming, kind, and seemed to genuinely care about my girls. Tom had been divorced for 2 years at that point, and Jake was living primarily with his mom. We dated for a year before getting married, and that's when the real challenges began. Blending our families was far from easy. Zoe, who was 16 when Tom and I got married, resented having a new father figure in her life. She often made snide comments about Tom trying to replace her dad and would purposely exclude him from family activities. Emma, on the other hand, latched onto Tom quickly, seeing him as a stable father figure after the turmoil of the divorce. Jake's situation was even more complicated. He was only 9 when we got married, and he split his time between our house and his mom's. Jake's mom, Lisa, had some issues with substance abuse, which meant that Jake's home life was often unstable. Tom felt incredibly guilty about this, and it led him to overcompensate when Jake was with us. From the beginning, Tom would let Jake get away with things he'd never allowed Zoe or Emma to do. He'd let Jake stay up late on school nights, buy him expensive gifts for no reason, and never follow through on consequences when Jake misbehaved. I tried to talk to Tom about this many times, but he always brushed it off, saying Jake needed extra support because of his mom's issues. This favoritism caused a lot of tension in our household. Zoe, already resentful of Tom, saw Jake as the golden child and would often pick fights with him. Emma, desperate for attention, started acting out in school. I felt caught in the middle, trying to balance everyone's needs while also addressing the clear disparity in how the kids were being treated. Things came to a head about 3 years ago when Jake, then 14, started begging Tom for a dog. We already had a cat, Whiskers, who had been with me and the girls since before the divorce. Jake insisted that he wanted a dog of his own, promising to take full responsibility for its care. I was hesitant. Jake had shown little interest in helping with Whiskers, and I worried that the responsibility of a dog would be too much for him. But Tom was adamant, insisting that having a dog would teach Jake valuable life skills and give him a sense of purpose. After weeks of debate, I reluctantly agreed. Tom surprised Jake with a golden retriever puppy for his 14th birthday. Jake was over the moon and named the puppy Buddy. For the first few months, Jake was great with Buddy. He'd wake up early to walk him before school, play with him in the backyard, and even started teaching him basic commands. Tom was thrilled, constantly pointing out how responsible Jake had become. But as the months wore on, Jake's enthusiasm began to wane. He'd forget to feed Buddy or take him out, leaving the task to whoever noticed first. He stopped playing with Buddy as much, preferring to spend time gaming or hanging out with friends. When we'd remind Jake of his responsibilities, he'd grudgingly do the bare minimum, often complaining the whole time. Tom and I argued about this constantly. I felt we should rehome Buddy if Jake couldn't care for him properly, but Tom always made excuses for Jake's behavior. He'd say things like, "Jake's just going through a phase," or "he's got a lot on his plate with school." I pointed out that Zoe and Emma both managed their schoolwork and extracurriculars while still helping around the house, but Tom would just accuse me of being too hard on Jake. This is where my daughter Zoe comes into the picture. She had just finished college and moved back home while job hunting. Zoe had always loved animals, and seeing Buddy being neglected broke her heart. She started picking up Jake's slack, taking Buddy for long walks, buying him toys, and even enrolling him in obedience classes. Over time, Buddy became deeply attached to Zoe. He'd follow her around the house, sleep by her door when she was out, and get visibly excited whenever she came home. Zoe became Buddy's primary caretaker, handling all his vet appointments, grooming, and day-to-day care. Jake barely interacted with Buddy anymore, and when he did, Buddy seemed indifferent to him. I tried multiple times to address this issue with Tom and Jake. I suggested that if Jake truly cared about Buddy, he needed to step up and take responsibility. But Jake would just shrug and say Buddy seemed happy with Zoe, while Tom continued to make excuses for Jake's behavior. The situation came to a head last month when Zoe got a job offer in a city about 2 hours away. She was excited about the opportunity but torn about leaving Buddy. I could see how attached they had become, and I knew Buddy would be devastated if Zoe left. After much consideration, I suggested to Zoe that she take Buddy with her. Zoe was thrilled with the idea but worried about Jake's reaction. I assured her that I would handle it and that Buddy deserved to be with someone who truly cared for him. When I told Tom and Jake about the plan, all hell broke loose. Jake threw a massive tantrum, yelling that we had no right to give away his dog. Tom backed him up, accusing me of favoritism and trying to push Jake out of the family. I stood my ground, pointing out that Jake hadn't properly cared for Buddy in over a year and that the dog would be happier with Zoe. The argument got heated quickly. Jake called me horrible names, saying I had never accepted him as part of the family. Tom threatened divorce if I stole Jake's dog, saying I was trying to erase all traces of Jake from our home. I was shocked by their reactions and how unreasonable they were being. In the end, despite the threats and anger, I told Zoe to take Buddy when she moved out last week. Jake hasn't spoken to me since, and Tom is sleeping in the guest room. The atmosphere in our house is tense and uncomfortable, with Emma trying to stay neutral but clearly stressed by the conflict. I feel terrible about the family turmoil this has caused, but I truly believe I made the right choice for Buddy's well-being. Am I the asshole for giving my stepson's neglected dog to my daughter? Update when it's been 2 weeks since my original post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their comments and support. It's been a challenging time, and your perspectives have been helpful as I navigate this family crisis. The day after Zoe left with Buddy, Jake's behavior took a sharp turn for the worse. He started slamming doors, yelling at everyone in the house, and even broke some of Zoe's things that she'd left behind. Tom continued to enable this behavior, making excuses and blaming me for traumatizing Jake by taking away his dog. I tried several times to have a calm discussion with Jake about his feelings, but he refused to engage. Instead, he demanded that we drive to Zoe's new place immediately and bring Buddy back. When I explained that wasn't going to happen, he stormed out of the house, slamming the front door so hard that a picture fell off the wall and shattered. A few hours later, we got a call from the local police station. Apparently, Jake had convinced one of his friends to drive him to Zoe's city. They had shown up at her apartment complex and caused a scene in the lobby, demanding she return Buddy. The building manager had called the police when Jake refused to leave. Zoe, understandably frightened by Jake's aggressive behavior, had locked herself in her apartment and called me in tears. Tom immediately left to pick up Jake from the police station, leaving me to deal with the fallout. I spent over an hour on the phone with Zoe, trying to calm her down and apologizing profusely for Jake's behavior. She was shaken but said she understood Jake was acting out of hurt. Still, she was firm in her decision to keep Buddy, saying the dog had been whimpering and hiding since Jake's outburst. While Tom was gone, I also spoke with Buddy's vet and trainer. Both confirmed that Zoe had been Buddy's primary caregiver for over a year. The trainer mentioned that Buddy had made significant progress in his obedience training since Zoe started bringing him, and the vet noted that Buddy's health had improved under Zoe's care. They both expressed concern that separating Buddy from Zoe now could be detrimental to the dog's well-being. When Tom and Jake returned home, I tried to have a family meeting to discuss what had happened. However, Tom shut it down almost immediately, saying Jake had been through enough and needed time to process. I was furious at Tom's continued refusal to address Jake's behavior and his role in enabling it. We ended up in a heated argument after Jake went to his room, with Tom accusing me of never having accepted Jake as part of the family. The next day, I received a cease and desist letter from a lawyer Tom had apparently contacted without my knowledge. The letter demanded the immediate return of Jacob's property, the dog known as Buddy, and threatened legal action if we didn't comply within 48 hours. I was stunned that Tom would go to such lengths without even discussing it with me first. Feeling overwhelmed and unsure of my legal standing, I consulted with a lawyer of my own. She assured me that we have a strong case if it comes to a legal battle. Buddy has been in Zoe's care for over a year, all vet records and expenses are in her name, and we have multiple witnesses to Jake's neglect of the dog. My lawyer also pointed out that since Buddy was a gift, and Jake is a minor, the legal ownership is murky at best. The household has become incredibly tense. Emma, my younger daughter, has retreated to her room, not wanting to get involved in the conflict. She told me privately that she agrees Buddy is better off with Zoe but doesn't want to take sides openly. Jake continues to alternate between angry outbursts and sullen silence, refusing to go to school and spending most of his time locked in his room playing video games. Tom and I are barely speaking. When we do interact, it's either to argue about the situation with Buddy or to discuss mundane household matters in clipped, formal tones. I've started sleeping in the guest room myself, unable to bear the tension of sharing a bed with Tom. I'm holding firm on my decision about Buddy, but I'm worried about the long-term impact this will have on our family. The rift between Tom and me seems to be growing wider by the day, and I'm genuinely concerned about the state of our marriage. Jake's behavior is also deeply troubling, and I fear that Tom's constant enabling is doing more harm than good. Despite all this, I still believe I made the right choice for Buddy's well-being. The dog deserves to be with someone who loves and cares for him properly. I just hope that in time, Jake and Tom will be able to see that too. I'll update again if there are any significant developments, especially regarding the potential legal action. Thank you all again for your support during this difficult time. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some unexpected developments in our family situation. Things have taken a turn that I never saw coming, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. After my last update, the tension in our house continued to escalate. Tom followed through on his threat of legal action, and we received a summons for a civil court date regarding ownership of Buddy. I was devastated that it had come to this, but I was prepared to fight for what I believed was right. The night before our scheduled court appearance, something unexpected happened. Jake knocked on my door late in the evening, asking if we could talk. It was the first time he had willingly spoken to me since Buddy left. I was surprised but agreed, hoping we might finally have a breakthrough. What Jake told me that night changed everything. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he was calm and seemed genuinely remorseful. He started by apologizing for his recent behavior, admitting that he had been lashing out because he felt guilty and ashamed. Then Jake revealed something that shocked me to my core. He confessed that he had been struggling with depression for the past year. He said it started after a falling out with his mom, Lisa. Apparently, Lisa had promised to get clean and that Jake lived with her full-time, but she had relapsed badly, leading to a huge fight between them. Jake had been keeping this from everyone, not wanting to disappoint his dad or add to the family's problems. Jake explained that his withdrawal and neglect of Buddy were symptoms of his depression. He said he often couldn't find the energy to take care of himself, let alone a dog. He admitted that he knew Buddy was better off with Zoe but had been too proud and ashamed to admit it earlier. I was stunned and heartbroken that I hadn't realized how much Jake was struggling. I hugged him as he broke down crying, apologizing over and over the trouble he had caused. We stayed up late into the night talking, with Jake opening up about his feelings of inadequacy and fear of abandonment. The next morning, Jake insisted on coming to court with us. Tom was surprised but didn't object. When we arrived at the courthouse, Jake asked to speak privately with Tom's lawyer. I wasn't privy to their conversation, but when they emerged, the lawyer looked troubled. When the judge called our case, Jake surprised everyone by asking to address the court. He took full responsibility for neglecting Buddy, telling the judge about his struggles with depression and how Zoe had stepped in to care for the dog when he couldn't. Jake said that while he missed Buddy, he knew the dog was better off with Zoe. He apologized for his recent behavior and asked the judge to allow Buddy to stay with Zoe. The judge commended Jake for his honesty and maturity. She ruled in our favor, officially granting ownership of Buddy to Zoe. Tom was visibly shocked by Jake's admission and the ruling. After court, he pulled Jake into a tight hug, tears in his eyes. On the drive home, Tom apologized to me for his behavior over the past month. He admitted that he had been so focused on protecting Jake that he had failed to see the real issues at hand. We agreed to start marriage counseling to work on our communication and the strain this situation had put on our relationship. Jake started seeing a therapist to work through his depression and the issues stemming from his complicated relationship with his mom. It's early days, but he seems to be making progress. He's opened up more to Tom and me about his feelings and has even started talking about possibly reaching out to Lisa again, with the support of his therapist. Zoe has been incredibly understanding through all of this. When I told her about Jake's struggles, she was sympathetic and offered to bring Buddy for visits once things settled down. She even suggested that Jake might want to volunteer at the animal shelter where she sometimes helps out, thinking it might be therapeutic for him. We're taking things one day at a time, but I feel cautiously optimistic. There's still a lot of healing to be done, but for the first time in a long while, it feels like we're all on the same page. I'll update again if there are any significant changes, but for now, we're focused on supporting Jake and rebuilding our family bonds. Final update: one of the most significant developments has been Jake's involvement at the local animal shelter. What started as occasional visits with Zoe has turned into a regular volunteer position. Jake spends several hours each week helping care for the animals, and it seems to have given him a renewed sense of purpose. He's formed a special bond with a three-legged cat named Tripod and has been talking about the possibility of adopting her. Tom and I have been attending marriage counseling, which has been both challenging and enlightening. We've had to confront some uncomfortable truths about our communication styles and the ways we've enabled certain behaviors in our children. It hasn't been easy, but I feel like we're slowly rebuilding the trust and understanding between us. We're learning to present a more united front in our parenting decisions, which has helped reduce tension in the household. Zoe has settled well into her new job and apartment. She brings Buddy to visit about once a month, which has become a positive family bonding time. Jake and Buddy's reunions were awkward at first, but they've grown more comfortable with each other. Jake often takes Buddy for walks during these visits, which seems to be healing for both of them. Emma, who had initially tried to stay out of the conflict, has become more engaged with the family. She's opened up about feeling overlooked during the whole ordeal and has been working with a school counselor to address some of her own insecurities. Tom and I have made a conscious effort to spend more one-on-one time with her, which seems to be helping. As for Buddy, he's thriving under Zoe's care. She recently sent us a video of him completing an advanced obedience course, which made Jake beam with pride. It's been heartwarming to see Jake celebrate Buddy's achievements without the possessiveness he once showed. Our relationship with Tom's ex, Lisa, remains complicated. Jake has had a few supervised visits with her, which have been emotional but ultimately positive. She's been making efforts to maintain her sobriety, and while we're cautiously optimistic, we're also realistic about the challenges she faces. Last month, we had a family meeting where we all sat down and openly discussed the events of the past year. There were tears and apologies all around, but also laughter and a sense of renewed connection. Jake formally apologized to Zoe for his behavior and thanked her for taking such good care of Buddy. It felt like a significant moment of healing for our family. Looking back, I can see how this difficult situation ultimately led to some positive changes for all of us. We've learned valuable lessons about communication, responsibility, and the importance of addressing underlying issues rather than just surface behaviors. While I stand by my original decision about Buddy, I regret not recognizing Jake's struggles sooner. Our family isn't perfect, and we still have our share of disagreements and challenges. But the crisis with Buddy forced us to confront issues we had been avoiding and ultimately brought us closer together. I'm cautiously optimistic about our future as a family. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and perspective have been invaluable in helping us navigate this difficult situation. While I don't anticipate needing to post any further updates, I'm grateful for the role this community has played in our family's story.